The Sealion 7 is BYD's large-size electric SUV, and at the time of filming and in UK is available in three trims. You've got the rear-wheel drive comfort model, which comes in at roughly £47,000, the all-wheel drive design trim, which comes in at roughly £52,000, and then you've got the all-wheel drive excellence trim with a slightly larger battery pack, which comes in at roughly £59,000. Now, the vehicle itself is covered for 6 years or 94,000 miles, whichever comes first. The battery and motor have got a warranty of 8 years or 125,000 and 94,000 miles respectively, and the bodywork is also covered for 12 years. Now, in this review you can see if it's actually worth its price tag and of course how it compares with some of its key competitors. So let us kick off this review and talk about its electric range, and here both the design and comfort trims have got the same 82.5 kilowatt hour battery pack, giving them a WLTP mixed driving cycle claim of 300 miles and 283 miles respectively. However, the Excellence model has got a larger 91.3 kilowatt hour blade battery pack, and this gives it a range claim of 312 miles on the WLTP test cycle. Now, it's absolutely fantastic to see that a heat pump comes included across the entire trim range as standard, so you don't have to pay extra for it. This effectively means that it's more efficient of heating the cabin on those colder climate days because it uses heat that's dissipated from the vehicle's electronics, such as the battery pack, to heat the cabin in a safe way. Now, I'm driving the Excellent AWD model, and from my mixed driving test, I actually netted a very impressive 275 to 295 miles. Now, as you'll be able to see from the mileage leaderboard, it actually does a tremendous job, specifically considering it's a pretty larger electric SUV. With that said, it doesn't quite dethrone the likes of the Tesla Model Y long-range rear-wheel drive or the Skoda Enyaq iV80 or the likes of the VW ID.5. Nonetheless, it does come very close, and in this respect, when it comes to the overall range anxiety, well, I can safely say that this is one of the most efficient large-size electric SUVs that I've actually tested to date. Now, with that in mind, it is a bit disappointing that BYD have still not given you a full one-pedal drive. See, via the center console, you can initiate a standard or a high mode, and in the high mode right now, driving at 20 miles an hour, if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal, the vehicle will start decelerating, but it will not come to a complete standstill. Why does that matter? Well, because some of its competitors do offer that functionality, and therefore means that when you're just pottering around town, it's a little less cumbersome to drive because you can simply drive with a singular pedal. Now, apart from that, you can of course plug it in, and in the comfort and design trims, they're limited to 150 kilowatts of input, while the Excellence trim moves over to 230 kilowatts. This means that you can go from roughly 10 to 80% in around half an hour. They also all have an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, allowing you to go from 0 to 100% in roughly 8 to 10 hours, while a regular 7 kilowatt wall box will take you roughly 13 to 15 hours. Now, it's also nice to see that vehicle-to-load charging is standard across the entire trim range. For those who are not aware, vehicle-to-load effectively means that you can discharge the battery pack to, for example, power a household appliance like a coffee machine or a kettle, or even another electric vehicle, but of course bearing in mind that it will charge at a very slow rate. So past efficiency, what about when it comes to performance? Well, here the Comfort model has got a rear-wheel drive configuration due to a motor that's planted on the rear axle. And here, combined with the battery pack, it dispatches 230 kilowatts of power or 308 horsepower and 380 newton meters of torque. It's claimed to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 6.7 seconds. Now, the all-wheel drive models have got two electric motors, one at the front and one at the rear. And the front one dispatches 160 kilowatts of power, while the rear one dispatches 230 kilowatts. Combined, they output 390 kilowatts or 523 horsepower and 690 newton meters of torque. Now, I actually had the all-wheel drive model tested using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.31 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 1.93 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 4.36 seconds, which is actually faster than the manufacturer's 4.5 second claim, and then 50 to 70 miles an hour in 2.27 seconds, and a peak acceleration of 0.74 G. Now, all the models have got a top speed that's limited to 133 miles an hour. Now, yes, indeed, the Sealion 7 is an absolute weapon on the roads, especially in terms of a straight line. But what about when it comes to braking performance? Well, thankfully over here, from my own test, I actually found that the brakes were actually pretty responsive. And this is because there are 4-piston alloy brakes that are fitted as standard across the entire trim range with ventilated disc brakes. Therefore, meaning that the manufacturer has actually thought about the overall stopping power, be it in terms of an emergency situation, or of course, if you're being a little bit fruity on the accelerator pedal around winding country routes. Now, this actually perfectly brings me onto its handling characteristics, and given the Sealion 7 is a relatively large all-electric SUV, it's no surprise to learn that it does suffer from body lean, and it also doesn't exactly have the best sort of one-to-one driver's input, even if you were to go on the sport mode preset. With that said, the Intelligent Torque Adaptation Control, ITAC for short, actually does do a tremendous job in that it gives you good level of confidence when you're putting your foot down to the metal, in that the vehicle does feel pretty grippy on the road. Now, what's more important, however, is the overall comfort of the vehicle, and here it's absolutely excellent. See, unlike a lot of its competitors, which opt for slightly hardened suspension, here the manufacturer has gone for more of a subtle approach. Therefore, meaning for those people who are just going to be pottering around town, you'll find that the vehicle is actually supremely comfortable, among one of the best in its class. Now, at the front, you've got a double wishbone setup, while at the rear, you've got a multi-link configuration. Both have got frequency variable damping with shock absorbers, therefore meaning that the combination leads for a really nice experience, and I think a lot of people will actually be pleasantly surprised while sat in the Sealion 7. Again, make no mistake, it's not exactly a sporty SUV, it's not going to be doing well around winding country routes, but for those people who are actually looking at this vehicle, and I suspect a lot of them will be just pottering around town or indeed just going around the city, then this vehicle is among one of the best when it comes to the overall driving comfort, specifically for a larger sized SUV. Another thing that really contributes to driving comfort is cabin noise, and thankfully I'm pleased to report that the Sealion 7 does do a tremendous job in this department, specifically at lower speeds. While it does suffer from a little bit of road noise at higher speeds and a bit of noise that can be heard deflecting off the wing mirrors, it's actually still pretty minimal. And for a vehicle of its class and price, I do think the manufacturer has done a tremendous job. Speaking of which, here, in terms of the overall interior design, it really does ooze class, especially if you compare and contrast it with some of the similar electric SUVs out there. The design that they've gone for, from the materials within the dashboard or the door frames, the steering wheel, and indeed in terms of the upholstery and the stitching work, it really does tick a lot of boxes. I should mention here that in the design and the comfort trims you have got a vegan leather, however in the top spec excellence trim this moves over to Napa leather, so that just makes it all that feel a bit more premium. Now, in terms of overall practicality, yet again BYD have nailed it. You've got physical buttons and dials towards the steering wheel, traditional stalks, and a few buttons that can be found towards the center console. Alas, over here, when it comes to your climate controls, they're all done directly via the infotainment system, but you have got a small little bar that resides at the bottom. Now, you might be quick to say that it's a little bit hard to navigate and indeed adjust while you're on the move, and you wouldn't be wrong because the buttons are a little bit small. Thankfully, you can use 3 fingers in order to swipe up or go from left and right, and that will adjust the climate or indeed the fan speed. So yes, BYD have actually thought that through. In terms of the 15.6-inch display, it's actually very responsive and vivid. It also supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is very much appreciated in this day and age. Here, the display is also fully rotatable, which allows you the degree of customization. For example, if you're using it for navigation, you might prefer a portrait format, while you're using it for multimedia consumption, you might prefer a landscape format. The option is there for you to use, and yes, you can even use voice commands in order to initiate that. And the voice commands are actually pretty good, and they also integrate well with the infotainment system, because here there is even Google Maps integration within the built-in sat-nav, and therefore you can, let's say, search for your nearby restaurant and it will do that via the built-in sat-nav. So it's again a good little integration by the manufacturer. Now, apart from that, you have also got a fully digitalized 10.25-inch instrument cluster, and it is pretty vivid and also gives you a degree of customization because you can flick between certain modes. Elsewhere, you've also got a head-up display in the Excellent trim, which is very much appreciated as it projects your traversing speed and the safety systems are in operation, giving you better peace of mind when it comes to safety, as it allows you to keep your eyes planted on the road at all times. Now, no matter which trim level you go for, you'll find a pretty punchy 12-speaker Dyn-Audio system that also includes a subwoofer. Across the sound frequency range, it does a decent job, although it does lack in terms of the overall mid-range tone, so therefore the vocals don't really come out to the foreground, but you'll get a pretty punchy and lively sound. So you might want to EQ this via the infotainment system, in other words, to reduce the bass impact. In comparison to some of its competitors, it does a decent job, but it doesn't quite dethrone some of the more premium audio systems out there on the market. Moving on, we get onto storage, and here I really do like what the manufacturers achieved within the cabin. At the top of the center console, you've got two areas for two smartphones, one of which has actually got a 50-watt wireless charger. Yes, 50, therefore meaning it can really rapidly charge a compatible device. In fact, to prevent your phone from overheating, there's also a small little cutout for a fan, and yes, that does operate, therefore cooling your smartphone in the process. Further down, you have got two cup holders, and then you've also got a pretty large area that's found underneath this center armrest. Now, underneath the center console, you'll find an open area with a non-slip material and some connections, for example, the 12-volt socket. Now, there is also the glove box, which is relatively large, and then you have got the front door bins, which are pretty big as well, where they'll accommodate a 500ml bottle. The rear two are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited, but still plentiful. You have also got some expandable storage in that you can pull down the armrest compartment in order to reveal two cup holders. And this does actually look pretty snazzy because not only have you got the cup holders, but you've also got a felt fabric-like material which can also be used for placing a smartphone or indeed smaller sized valuables. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot capacity. And here you've got a pretty large 520 litres to play around with, or a whopping 1,789 litres if you drop down the seats. Yes, indeed, it really does compete with some of the larger sized SUVs out there on the market, be it electrified or not, and therefore will cater for you taking larger luggage or indeed any sort of weekly shops. That certainly won't be a problem. It's also very practical. You've got a hatchback design with an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range. Then you've got 60/40 rear split folding seats and also a flat loading bay. There is also a small little compartment that can be found in the underfloor, therefore allowing you to take your charging cables as well. Now, you've also got a front compartment, that is an area underneath the bonnet, which gives you an additional 58 litres. Then you have also got a roof capacity of 75 kilograms, and when it comes to towing capacity, it's rated at 750 kilograms for unbraked trailers, while when it comes to brake trailers, the rear-wheel drive sits at 750 kilograms, while the all-wheel drive models move up to 1,500 kilograms. So past transporting goods, what about when it comes to seating comfort? Well, here I had no issues whatsoever at the front or rear of the cabin. The seats themselves are very accommodating and soft. As for headroom and legroom, as someone who's just under 6 foot, I didn't find it to be an issue at the back either, which is very much appreciated. That is also due to the way that the manufacturer has designed the rear footwell design and also optimized the seats. Now, better still, in terms of the features that you've got a heated steering wheel as standard. Both the front seats are heated and ventilated too. The driver's seat has got 8-way electronic controls with lumbar support, while the passenger has 6-way electronic controls. And as a reminder, yes indeed, they all come fitted as standard. The same could be said at the rear, where the rear outer two are heated and have also got a 20-degree reclining function. Better still, I absolutely love the really large panoramic roof, which really draws in some nice light within the cabin in a safe way because it's also UV protected. Again, this is all features as standard, which isn't the same that could be said about the vast majority of competitors, which actually charge extra for some of these features. The only thing, however, that you're going to have to spend some money on in terms of options is when it comes to the overall paint finish, because as standard you have got a grey colour. If, however, you want black, white or a lighter shade of grey, you have to spend an additional £1,100, which I do think is actually pretty reasonable given the overall size of the vehicle. Now, this actually does bring me on to its exterior design, and I've got no real complaints because I do think it has got a very nice striking pose on the road. See, at the front you've got these nice headlights which feed seamlessly with the front bumper, and also the kind of covered grille design gives it a really nice profile. Then towards the side you've got 19-inch alloys in the rear-wheel drive model, or these really gorgeous 20-inch alloys in the all-wheel drive models, which is actually pictured. then unfortunately you do not have body-coloured wheel arches or side skirts, but given they don't protrude too much or indeed are too large, it doesn't actually really bother me in the slightest. At the rear, you have got these things called water drop tail lights. I say that because that's what the marketing at BYD have used, but nonetheless, what you call it, I do like the overall look of the tail lights because it looks quite modern. It also does feed seamlessly with the rest of the vehicle, and the additional spoiler does add a little bit of extra snazziness to it. Now, continuing with the impressive list of features that come as standard on the Sealion 7, we have to talk about its safety credentials. And indeed over here, when it comes to the driver assistance systems, you have got a plethora of them. You've got adaptive cruise control, lane centering control, lane departure warning, emergency lane keeping assist, traffic sign recognition, intelligent speed limit control, driver fatigue management, driver distraction warning, automatic emergency brake, forward collision warning, rear collision warning, front and rear cross traffic alert, blind spot monitor, and door opening warning. Yes, indeed, a whole long list of driver assistance systems which effectively try and keep you safer on the road. And it's very much appreciated to see all of these actually featured as standard across the entire trim range. I wish more manufacturers did it. As for the overall adaptive cruise control, it actually did work very well in keeping me at a safe distance from the leading vehicle and also not feeling too jerky either. And the lane centering control actually did a tremendous job of keeping me at the center of the lane on a motorway and therefore giving me steering support where needed. Now, to conclude, I would like to talk about parking and visibility, and here I do find the vehicle actually very easy to maneuver. The turning circle does actually feel pretty tight. It's also nice to see that the A-pillars have been optimized, therefore making it very easy to peer around the corner, and as a result, when it comes to visibility at the front and the side, it's a non-issue. However, at the rear, given the overall size of the vehicle, it can be a little bit more limited. However, you have got front and rear parking sensors and also high resolution 360-degree cameras. And yes, indeed, it allows you to really see your surroundings on that gorgeous display and therefore makes it a little bit better to do those more complex parking maneuvers without having to curb your rims or indeed go into an obstacle. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict of the BYD Sealion 7. And truth be told, I really do love what the manufacturers achieved, specifically at this price point. So you're getting a completely feature-rich vehicle, which is actually very comfortable to drive in and around town. It's really nippy in terms of its straight line performance, specifically if you go for the all-wheel drive models. And then you've got plenty use of technology within the cabin with a whole host of driver assistance systems, good amount of headroom and legroom for your rear occupants, and also a fantastic boot capacity. Combining all of this is very easy to see ourselves recommending the BYD Sealion 7, and as such it gets our Best Buy award. Now I'd be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below and how you feel it compares with some of its key competitors. Now if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.